Hello and welcome to the Right Click Say podcast. I'm your host Calcio, joined as always by my fellow host Jimmy T. On today's show, we're going to be talking all things royalties, about projects that have changed the way that they want to make their projects work, and about how we think it might affect the market.
Yeah, so it's a big topic in the space at the moment. It has been, this kind of royalties conversation has been rumbling on for quite a long time now. I think it was brought really into spotlight. Was it XY2? Was it XYX2? What's the name of that marketplace?
X2Y2.
X2Y2, that's the one. X2Y2 were the ones that kind of brought it quite prominent by saying that they were going to introduce optional royalties for people that can literally choose how much royalties they wanted to spend when purchasing an NFT.
Yeah, I think for me it was really interesting when they said that, because in my head royalties were one of those things that people had used as a selling point of the NFT space for so long, right? For months and months, it was artists can get rewarded for their work because they get a residual. Perpetuity. Yeah, and that seemed like a really good idea. I think that this is where I'm kind of going to hand back over to you, but seems to be where the most controversies come from. We've had countless projects, and it is countless now, have a huge amount of money raised via secondary sales, least of all before millions of dollars raised on their mint, and a lot of that money's not really been seen again.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it kind of depends very, very much project to project how people are managing their finances and whether this works for them. So a reason this has kind of popped up as a recent topic again is obviously Frank from The Gods has come out and said that he wants to move the whole of The Gods, their whole ecosystem, Utes, over to the 0% model. And therefore, they're only making money off their initial mint, and also any other products that they have, like they've got Dust, their token they've got alongside it. But what I think for the space this means is that projects are going to have to become a lot more creative around how they generate their revenue.
It's good in a way, because I think it hopefully will be something that other people copy and they will use it as a trendy thing, right? Like we were talking about Alex Schilling-Villen. We were talking with him about whether royalties were outdated, but slightly off topic of that, he mentioned that the reason that he wasn't doxed per se was because that's like a Web3 thing to do, right? You don't dox. It's kind of in line with it. He's not bothered about it, but it's in line with the Web3 culture. I guess it would be quite interesting to see whether or not this is one of those equivalent shifts where it's now actually quite trendy to use it as a sales point, almost to say no royalties for us. We're not doing that. We're not taking anything. We're just going to roll it out.
It's funny how these kind of metas come in, the trends in the space come in, and everyone kind of immediately jumps from their existing roadmap or their methodology that they had and immediately tries to change, to jump on the bandwagon, because most of this market's based on hype. So I guess where the trends are, that's where the money is, and why these companies are trying to be pretty fluid, but also at risk of just basically changing everything too often.
It's also kind of interesting though, because I think it leaves an exciting new era open, right? We need something to change. We need something to be the catalyst for the next step. And I'm kind of hopeful that we actually see a few other projects come out and say, okay, cool, we'll drop royalties. But on the other side of it, it is worth mentioning that the reason I think most people were at peace to a point with royalties was that this money was supposed to be being used to continue the growth of the project long term. Now, the harsh reality is, as we know, a lot of the time, this money's not being used very well. But the people that will be really affected by this, if it becomes a lot more than just an optional thing, is those one-of-one artists who do create fantastic pieces and actually really, if we're being honest, at least to me, deserve to have the ability to have that residual there. And I just wonder how they'll be affected by it if we do see a bigger change.
Well, it's the classic thing with NFTs, isn't it? And art. Well, arts has historically been very well known for the artists getting paid very little for their work. And then as they become more prominent, the people who have collected their work over the years tend to make the money from their art because the valuations have gone up so much. NFTs was like a solution to this, but the fact it's not enforceable currently at the protocol level just means that people have always got the option not to pay it. And as we know, money is the big motivator. People, if they have the option on masses, will just not pay. And therefore that money doesn't end up back with the artists, it ends up with the people who have purchased the art in the first place.
It's a tough one though, because I'm in exactly the same position in my head. You know, at the end of the day, you want to save as much money as possible if you're going to make purchases.
Yeah.
And there are definitely times where you would opt to keep the royalties on, but if it's just for a huge collection, it does feel like, because of how poorly the fund's been used a lot of the time, is it really worth us doing that?
It's an interesting one because so many projects as part of their roadmap, they talk about what the community funds are going to be used for, and the community funds are usually a small amount of the mint funds and then a percentage of the royalties. So the royalties is often the sort of perpetual revenue stream for funding the community outreach side of a project. So to remove royalties, in theory, actually just massively reduces the liquidity of any of these communities, and I think in a way it's also going to create more rug projects, and not because the founders want to rug their projects and leave, but because they just will run out of money. There's a lot of projects that have folded over the last few months and this year because their royalties have dried up. And now these are projects that made like hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe millions off their initial mint, but the cost of everything in Web3, from development to your artists to anyone who works on your team, all the prices are massively inflated in Web3. Everyone knows they can charge a lot more money to a Web3 company, especially NFTs, and therefore these companies burn revenue so quickly that the royalties model was able to prop up and give sort of long-term growth to their business. Without that, they have to be really creative about how they make their money. And at the end of the day, that money is going to be made from their holders. So the fact that you giving up your royalties, you're just going to be paying that money in a different way. In my opinion, we'll be just paying that money in a different way. They're not going to bring out another mint, or they could bring out another mint, but that's not going to, again, benefit the holders. That's going to lower the value of your NFT, or they're going to have to release more products, more things, more stuff that you can engage with to generate that revenue from their holders.
I remember listening to Luca, the guy who owns Pudgy Penguins now, talking quite recently about how one of the biggest things he did with his marketing for all of his brands was drop the phrase NFT or anything to do with Web3 for exactly that reason. It instantly just becomes this, let's tack on another 20, 30, 40%. And we know this from being friends with developers. They are charging double, triple, quadruple what they'd get in Web2.
Miles more.
And I think that's, again, one of the other things that a lot of the time these plays are gimmicky. They're clever, and I'm not, again, the gods have done a great job here. Frank's done a great job because he's kept their names in everyone's mouths. The art's still not revealed for Utes, which is what it is. It's been 6 weeks and they've made millions of dollars off of it, but again, they're still getting sales regularly. But then I wonder actually what the motivation is in a sense, and they're not a very good example of this because they're clearly
such
are
a big
building
brand now, aren't they? So they're getting loads of people coming to them, VCs offering them revenue streams. They're an NFT project that can go to 0% royalties and not be affected by it because they've got a war chest and they've got a load of big brands that want to connect with them.
And that's kind of where I was leading into, and I think that the only thing you'll potentially see is exactly what you mentioned a moment ago, which is brands hoping to follow suit, use it as a sales technique to be like, oh, cool, we don't have any royalties, and being less, well, just simply put, less funded than someone like the gods who, as you said, have had several successful mints now. I would imagine that there'd be many investors who'd be quite happy to put their hands in their pockets for them. That's not every project. Most projects don't have that luxury. So I think that a lot of people are going to get blindsided by that and end up putting themselves in a very sticky situation.
I'm quite against 0% royalties. And the main reason for that is that I think the only people that 0% royalties support are flippers. People that are here to trade the market, not holders, not genuine NFT enthusiasts or investors, people who are here to make money. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not criticizing anyone who does that. It's just a move to 0% royalty disproportionately benefits flippers and traders than it does to holders and community integrators. So
why would a brand like the gods, in your opinion, choose to make that move? What's in it for them?
It's, again, about brand representation, so it makes it look like, takes away that negative perception that they're promoting churn on their own project, because obviously it is within their interest to promote secondary sales if they're getting money from it, and therefore, that's not a necessarily healthy thing for the market, and especially a project that has spent 6 weeks in pre-reveal. Extended pre-reveal always used to have the reputation of projects were using it to basically milk as many secondary sales as they could to increase their profit from royalties, because normally at reveal you get a big sell-off and then you enter a period of kind of more sustained leveled off secondary sales, and you lose that kind of pre-reveal spiking.
That's like kind of my instant thought process. Not that they were doing that, because it was a very I guess a very low shot from brands back in the day. I said back in the day, it was a year ago. We used to see it all the time. They'd have to have that pre-reveal phase where everyone would be trying to buy them up and the hype would be curving. That bell would go all the way to the top because everyone was desperate to hopefully buy when they hadn't been able to mint. I don't think that's what they were originally thinking, but I do...
Yeah, I don't either.
Agree that it was one of those things where it could well have been seen that way. What's next, though?
Well, one of the things that, I mean, one of the reasons that they've said that they've done it, and this is a really important point actually, is that they said it was their best decision for their business, removing royalties and therefore protecting themselves from potential future legal actions. And this is a problem with the space at the moment. Obviously, there is regulation is coming. It's very much a Wild West at the moment. And there is a train of thought that artist royalties, or the way that royalties are set up with some projects, could lead to litigation, basically, and basically legal problems for these companies. So with a company that doesn't need the royalties, like they've got a war chest, it's maybe a smart legal move to change this way.
Well, to be fair, and it is kind of unknown for the full details, but the SEC are obviously looking into Bored Ape and Yuga, which is... They're the kings of our space. Whether you like them or not, you agree with what they've done or not, whatever, they are the king, right? They are, 100% the Bitcoin, right? And for the SEC to be comfortable to go at them is a big indication that no one below them at any level is safe. And so I guess these slight changes are probably not necessarily preemptively knowing that the SEC are going to go at Bored Ape or whatever, but probably along the thinking of, can we do this to protect ourselves? Should we do it? Yes, we should. I think that's where it actually gets a bit less conspiracy theory and a little bit more factual, which is ultimately that there are a shitload of unlegalized, poorly controlled things that we have had become normal in our space, but in the real world, when the SEC can come in and make a shitload of money off of batting everyone up, they will, and that's now what we might well see. So I guess from a purely and rather less interesting and more boring stance point, just doing these things as legal tighteners is 100% the right thing for them to do.
Yeah, and also this is the only way regulation comes. Regulation comes out of litigation. It doesn't come from mostly someone sat in an office going, you know what, I think this is what the rule should be. It normally has to be thrashed out in court, and that's where the kind of changes come. And that's why in like every law show that you might watch, they're always referring back to previous cases in every kind of like law debate that they have, because that is the foundation of how law works, and we need these cases to come and be debated in court and be judged and judgments called upon to actually find out the way that the market's going to move forwards.
But yeah, overall, I think this is one of the things that we could talk about for a long time. Just the basic of, because it goes from being a small conversation of one project saying we're not going to have royalties, and it then in 15 minutes goes from that to, okay, well, if we're in a free mint stage still and no one's getting any royalties, what are we doing? And it's very quickly, it goes from A to B, if that makes sense. And
here's an interesting part of it. So NFTs are one of the big things. The big selling point of NFTs ever was royalties, right? Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I'd say for artists, definitely. And it was one of the things that I thought was quite interesting. It was really easy to tell people, say you spoke to a friend, very easy to say, the artist I buy from will get money.
Yeah.
When it sells.
And what is the kind of historic NFT project that everyone kind of knows about? The classic old NFT project?
Punks?
Yeah. Punks have got 0% royalties and always have been.
That's true. That's true. But then again, they are akin to the gods in this example, in that they transcend the norm because of what they are. And it's very much like taking Ferrari and comparing it to a Fiat. It just doesn't add up, because most people don't drive a Ferrari, most people drive a Fiat, right? So when we're talking about everyday, every person, normal people, blah blah blah, we can't go to the punks and the gods of the world. We got to stick with the Fiats, that. And again, I'm not going to list off a load of projects, but if you could probably list 99% of projects with good or bad intentions, they are the Fiats. So 100% punks don't have royalties, but they were made as a labour of love back in 2017 or whatever it was, and they weren't made to make anyone money. That was the point. It was just, we can do this.
Maybe that's the best thing. Make something that's not intended to make money, and you will make a fortune.
And that's why we need loads of podcast sponsors for this podcast. It was labour of love. We'd like some sponsors. Let's get it sorted out.
And on that bombshell, Fiat, if you are looking for to sponsor a podcast, we've obviously led you into very good light here, comparing you to a Ferrari.
Badly, but yeah, we can work with Fiat. If Fiat want to sponsor an NFT podcast,
I think it would just be too confusing, wouldn't it? You can't have Fiat sponsoring a crypto-based kind of podcast or show.
No, but it would actually be quite good, though. Listen, I don't have a
crypto
contact
sponsored by Fiat. Hang on, what?
Yeah, spelt the same. Yeah,
it's spelled
maybe
the
not.
same. Yeah, people would get confused.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, Jimmy, as always, to chat up about royalties and just generally the market as it sits. We've been really enjoying putting out more content, and we've got some fantastic episodes coming up with Shilling Villain, of course, Alfie Motion, the Doodle's Head animator man, fancy guy,
Apes,
and we've got loads of other bits and bobs. Loads of them.
Yeah,
more of these.
Yeah,
and a little 5-minute or less video coming up on Bored Ape Yacht Club, which will be amazing as well. But yeah, I've been your host, Calcio, joined as always by my fellow host, Jimmy T. Don't forget to comment below what you'd like us to talk about next week. Make sure, of course, to like this video and subscribe to the only #1 animated podcast in Web3, Torah. We're not just the best, we're the only. So I don't know if I should say the only. I think I should just say the #1, because that's technically not lying. We are the #1 animated podcast in Web3.
Yeah, you can say that.
So